So, this is my audience here. I have my parents and my friend Ryan. He's currently on FaceTime.
So, I've heard it all before about people who don't like sports. They say there's not any thought in it. It's just a bunch of people running around, just throwing balls around at each other, and it's only athleticism. But there is actually a lot of intelligence and thought that goes into sports, especially basketball when it comes to the defensive side. And even more specifically with zone defenses such as a 2-3 zone defense. My presentation today is on how to run a 2-3 zone defense and the reasons why, including the positives and negatives of running one. So on the screen now, we see a defensive positioning where the X's are the defensive players and the O's are the offensive players. To start off with how you run it, we'll look at the guard position, which would be these two X's up at the top. Their goal is to do their best to stop jump shots from around the 3-point line and to stop drives from the 3-point line into the paint. So once the ball is bringing down, one of them has to stop the ball to stop the offensive player from just driving into the lane and forcing the big men to focus on them and not the other players. So the defensive players will have to deal with an entire range of this area, pretty much what the circle around them is. That would be the area they need to cover. Now for the bottom post players, their job is to keep offensive players out of the lane. They're trying to protect this block area here as much as possible while covering some of this mid-range. The center defensive player especially needs to communicate with the rest of the players, letting know where other offensive players are. For example, he might tell this defender, hey, you have a guy behind you. You need to be aware of that. And thus, this defender should be aware of the offensive player that is behind him and move accordingly. In a zone defense, you cover an area, and any defender, any offensive player that goes into that area is now your man, unlike a man-to-man zone where you have one specific person. On to the reasons why you would run a 2-3 zone. One reason is you would like to have a heavy post presence. In this area here, which is known as the post, you have 3 defenders there and 2 defenders who can easily collapse in to deal with any post threats. Another reason is you might not have as much energy. You might have been running a man defense and then you're getting tired and all of your subs are tired as well. You might want to change to a zone defense to conserve energy and potentially make it to halftime where you can rest up. On to the positives of running a defense, a 2-3 zone defense. One of the best positives is it is the best defense to deal with teams that are very tall or they might have a few very tall players. I know from experience from playing Shippensburg High School last year, they had 2 players who were both about 6'8". And to deal with them, we had to run a 2-3 zone defense so we could have 2 players being able to double onto one of their big men when they would get the ball, so then the big men would have to kick it back outside, and they did not have any shooters that could threaten us from there. Another positive is that most of the time you will get the rebounds. With having such a heavy post presence of at least 3 defenders in there, if not 4 or 5, most of the time you will get the rebounds from shots and you will be able to push it up the floor and have everyone grouped together. And then it is a great defense for dealing with overly athletic teams that would prefer to drive into the post and shoot close range shots. And it does not take as much energy or athletic prowess as something like a man defense would take, where you need to win your one-on-one matchup and keep your specific defender in front of you while having to run around everywhere. On to the negatives. The main weakness of the 2-3 zone defense is if the enemy team if they're just shooting the lights out, where they are not missing a deep 3 shot or like a long range shot, it just shuts down the defense. Long range shots are the biggest weakness of the 2-3 defense. Another weakness that is inherent to all zones but is incredibly evident with 2-3 zones, with having 2 guards at the top, is quick ball movement around the top will create open gaps where perimeter offensive players can drive into the paint, causing the post players to have to focus on the ball and the driver and focus to stop them, when they should be focusing on the big man. Another key weakness is that communication is absolutely necessary. If there is very little communication, or if communication lines get jammed, then the defense just fails and it just falls apart. The main communicator should be the center big man who will be in the post. He should be the command center of the defense, sort of say, where he's telling people where to go, where defenders are, and if there's defenders behind him. He should have an entire view of the floor and should be able to have better insight than everyone else. To recap, a 2-3 zone defense is an incredibly effective defense when you are dealing with tall players, or just in general a tall team, and is very good for getting easy rebounds and if you need to conserve energy or you are not the most athletic team. But long range shooting guards and a team that is hitting their shots consistently is a horrible weakness to it. And now that you have sat through this presentation, next time you go to see a basketball game, you may have some better knowledge of what is going on, instead of just thinking these guys are running around. There's no thought to this at all.